our third word in our series of 7 becomes our persona word. It's a circle, and the top is 1, 2. Our third word is our persona word. It's that mask we bring attention to. So for me, I tried to figure out, okay, what was little Jerry? What did little Jerry need to be in order to get attention when he was 3? I came up with the word likable.
This is episode number 660 with Jerry Giordano, 7 words that can change your life. And I'm going to leave it there and have you wonder, what are those 7 words and why are we talking about them today? Hi, everybody. I'm Sandy Weiner. Welcome back to Last First Date Radio, where we believe it is never too late to go on your last first date. And to support you, I have written 3 books. The first is Becoming a Woman of Value, How to Thrive in Life and Love. And this is a book to help you increase your core confidence and live a more aligned life. And the second book is Choice Points in Dating. This is a guidebook to all the choices that you make in dating, from how to think about dating to how to create your must-have and deal breaker lists, to how to know whether to stay or go, how to do online dating, offline dating, every single aspect of dating until you go on your last first date. And the third book is Love at Last. And this is true stories of falling in love later in life. This is an inspirational book of stories of real couples who found love after 40, 50, 60, 70, and beyond. And all 3 books are available on Amazon for Kindle or paperback or Audible. Before I bring Jerry on to the show, I want to invite you, if you're not yet a member and you are a woman over 40, to join my Facebook group. It's called Your Last First Date. This is a safe, sane space for people who are looking for real support in their dating journey. And even after you have a relationship, this is a place that people come and they don't want to leave. So join us at Your Last First Date. And now for my guest, Jerry Giordano. He is an award-winning advertising copywriter, a creative director. He works and lives in New York City, Chicago, LA, Austin, and Dallas, everywhere. He is co-producer of TEDx events. He has written 4 screenplays. He studied comedy at Chicago's Second City, and he performed sketch comedy in New York City and LA. And he is also the author of Your 7 Words to a Happier You: Unlock the Story Sabotaging Your Relationships. Welcome to the show, Jerry.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
You have this new book. It's called 7 Words to a Happier You, and we're going to talk about that today. So tell us, what are the 7 words? Why'd you write it? Tell us about it.
Well, I wrote it because I had to. No, I mean, that's what I told people. I had to write it. No, I didn't set out to write a book. Back in 2017, I was engaged to a woman who I thought was the love of my life, After 2 failed marriages, I thought that this was the person. She actually got me. This was the person who I was supposed to be with, and this was the person who checked all those boxes for me. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. And we were together 4.5 years. We were engaged. And then in middle of January in 2017, my mom passed away. And then 12 days later, I get a breakup email from the fiance. And kind of out of the blue, kind of shock. I was a wreck. I don't know what else, how else to put it. I was a wreck. I was at rock bottom. It just threw me for a loop. I was depressed. I was a 32 car pileup on the highway. I mean, I was just a wreck. And it was the lowest point of my life, and I couldn't stop crying. I didn't cry before, and I didn't have tears. I grew up in this Italian guy from New Jersey. We're not exactly taught how to deal with our emotions. But Northern New Jersey, not exactly the mecca of transformational thinking, as you might imagine. I had all these pent up feelings, and all of a sudden it all came out, and they wouldn't stop. I had something in my bag of tricks that I like to say. I had meditation. I started meditating. I started meditating 4 months before January of 2017. After trying to meditate for 20 years and not being able to, I sat down one day and I said, okay, I'm going to learn how to meditate. And I did. And I did it. I got up the next morning and I meditated. And every day I was meditating October, November, December, January. And I like to think that the universe knew that I wasn't going to be able to start meditating come end of January, February. It gave me like a 4-month runway. Inside that safety of the meditation, I found I had these 3 meditations that really turned things around for me. Basically, they became these dots that I connected, and over the next few months turned into my 7 words, which we can talk about in a little bit. The 7 words came about as something that I needed to find for myself to pull myself out of this dark hole I was in.
Came through you. It's kind of like what Chris Martin talks about in Coldplay, that songs come through him. And I do believe that when you're tuned into your creativity, you can't help but produce something because it has to come through. That had to be devastating to get a breakup text, email. Like what kind of communication? The email, that's awful. I mean, after 4 years of being together, how does somebody do that? I don't understand that.
Well, that was a good question too. How did she do that? Because again, as I talked about in the very beginning, when I started speaking to her, she was always the person, who I felt like who got me, who was in touch with all these emotions. And she prided herself on her communication skills. And she talked about communication, but she really wasn't a good communicator. But she talked about integrity. At the end, we really found out she was great at talking about it, but not exactly following through on it. So, but all that stuff that kind of hit me all at once when I got the breakup email. And when that happened, I mean, I thought this has to be by far the worst thing that ever happened to me. And turns out to happen to be one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I would have never come up with my 7 words. If that didn't happen, I wouldn't have turned everything around. I wouldn't have turned my life around and understood all the things that happened to me in my past relationships and why they happened. And it all had to do with the 7-word thing. So I have, honestly, I have her to thank for that, if you will.
Yeah, our greatest pain can crack our hearts open. It can let the light in, as Leonard Cohen said. That's where the light comes in. And I do believe that. I think it's painful. You never want to wish somebody to go through something devastating where they feel like they can't exist anymore. But if you can make it through, and you did do things that helped you get through, that's the key. There are people who don't recover. You're meditating, you're getting these messages, these 3 key meditations, and then 7 words come through. So can you give us a little more context around the messages and what the 7 words are?
3 meditations, I put them in the book, but they were totally different. They were within a week and a half or 2 weeks apart. So there was probably 5 or 6 weeks in between these 3 meditations. And afterwards, I waited around for another couple of weeks to say, maybe there's another one connecting these dots, but there wasn't. And I said, okay, I guess I'm left with these 3 meditations to literally, okay, they mean something. In your gut, when you feel something, you say, oh, I know in my gut that this is important, that this means something. I just didn't know what it was yet, but I knew it was important. I'm a collector, inspector, and connector of dots. That's what I do. I'm a dot connector. So these 3 meditations were literally dots that I felt like needed to be connected. And then I did a deep dive into all the stuff. One of the last meditation was a vision of me when I was at that age in 2017, and a 3-year-old version of me walking along, sitting by a lake, and a 3-year-old Jerry starts crying. And he says, I can't do this anymore. I can't carry this anymore. I'm exhausted. And big Jerry saying, I don't know what it is, but I'll help you. And they're both crying. And then all of a sudden it ended. I was like, okay, that's my meditation. Where do I go? Let me go back and connecting these dots. And I said, okay, well, that 3-year-old Jerry was the person he had the most quote unquote issues at the time. He was the one who was upset. So I'll start at age 3. So I started doing all this research about 3-year-olds, diving into Jung's inner child and all that stuff, and 3-year-olds and what happens at 3. And turns out that 3 is this, they call it the magic age. At 3 is like all this stuff starts, all these changes start happening at 3. They start understanding cause and effect. They start living in life called magic think, right? Where, if you see a 3-year-old on a playground and they're dressed like Wonder Woman or Superman, oh, Sally, you're playing Wonder Woman. It's like, no, I am Wonder Woman. First line in the book is from Carl Jung. And it says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. And once I came across that, I was like, okay, there's unconscious going on here, 3-year-old Jerry. And when we're 3 years old, there's no logic going on in a 3-year-old mind, because logic doesn't occur until we're like 5 or 6. So I see like the book is kind of meditation meets science, meets metaphysics, meets my 3-year-old inner child. So all this stuff started coming together. And so eventually I came up with this understanding that what was little 3-year-old Jerry? What was he carrying around? Why was he so upset? Why was he crying? Why he said, I can't take this anymore. I can't carry this anymore. And along the way, another quote came up with me, and it was from Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said, and they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Right.
Which, once I came across that again, and I heard it years ago, but once it came up in the process here, it was like light bulb, light bulb, right? What was little Jerry feeling when he was 3 years old? Not what he was thinking, because thinking doesn't start in really logic until we're, again, 5 or 6. When I was 3, my mom had a baby sister. I wasn't getting the attention that I really wanted from my mom, right? Makes sense. She doesn't have time for me anymore. Not that she doesn't love me, but she doesn't have time for me because she's got a newborn to take care of. So I started extrapolating all that information about what was little Jerry feeling, not what he was thinking, because there was no logic. And so I came up with these 7 words about what he was feeling. And our third word, and I won't get into the other 2 at first, because it'll be confusing once you get into the book, but just for our sake of condensing this into our conversation, our third word in our series of 7 becomes our persona word. So if you think of the 7 words, and it's not a linear path, it's a circle. And the top is 1, 2. Our third word is our persona word. It's that mask we bring attention to. So for me, I tried to figure out, okay, what was little Jerry? What did little Jerry need to be in order to get attention when he was 3? I came up with the word likable. Jerry had to be likable. For me, that's how I got attention. Yeah, I had to be likable. My 4th word is control. I had to be controlling, being likable in all situations, which is impossible to do. It's impossible to be anything all the time, as I'm sure you could agree with. I mean, we can't be anything. And then eventually I got to my 6th word, and my 6th word became my sabotage word. How did I sabotage my relationships? Well, I did that by being subordinate. I became subordinate in all my relationships. And I did it because I needed to be likable. And if I didn't want to, if I rocked the boat and I didn't become subordinate, then they wouldn't like me. And that's the setup. And then it goes to our 7th word, which goes back to all our words again. So that cycle repeating over and over. So when I was 3 and 13 and 23 and 33 and 43, that 7-word cycle came by, and my 2 drivers of that cycle were likable and subordinate. I looked at all those times where I had to be likable to everyone. Don't rock the boat, Jerry. Be a likable guy. And then being subordinate, it gave my power away in all the relationships I was in. I looked at it and I went, oh my God, there's my whole life in 7 words. And I did the words with a friend of mine who, he asked me, what's going on with this word thing? You're talking about this word thing. And I sat down at his house with a napkin and a pen, and I drew it out, and I said, here's my whole life in 7 words. And he looked at it and he goes, I can relate to that. And I did it with 2 more people, and then 4 more people. And by the time I got to 12 or 15 people, everybody kept saying the same thing. You need to write a book. You have to write a book.
It's really interesting, and it's also relatable. I can understand why your friend said, I can relate to this.
Hmm.
The inner child work is so important, and so few of
Hmm.
us really understand where our patterns began
Right.
and who we unconsciously bring to the world. And so that
Hmm.
unconsciousness that you talk about with Carl Jung and how
Hmm.
people make us feel. And I'm thinking about your fiance and how she had the right words, but not the true message behind the words. And so many people today, if you look on social media, there are all these gurus who talk about all this spirituality, and yet they're living a completely different life. Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Music Unlimited. You can listen to over 70 million songs and thousands of playlists and stations. Plus, you can now stream your favorite podcasts like Last First Date Radio. You can listen to any song, anytime, anywhere, on any of your devices. Get Amazon Music Unlimited for free for 30 days. Just head on over to getamazonmusic.com/last first date to learn more and claim this offer. The subtitle of your book is Unlock the Stories Sabotaging Your Relationship. So let's get a little deeper into the sabotage part of that.
Sure. Sure. So when I mentioned our third word is our quote unquote persona word, that persona, the mask that we want to show the world. And then our sixth word, when we get to our sixth word is our how we sabotage ourselves, right? And that's, by trying to be a certain way all the time in our third word, and our sixth word is the sabotage word. So for me, my sabotage word was subordinate, right? I had to be subordinate because I didn't want to rock the boat. Now, everybody has a different third and sixth, have their own third and sixth word. And I've honed these words. There's 32 third words in the book, and there's 28 sixth words. And these have been basically I've been honing this for like the last 6+ years, kind of coming up with the right words. And some of the words are nuanced. They're very similar, but they're different. So like some six words are what people do to sabotage themselves. I think you could relate this talking to some people. Some of the sabotage words are run or hide or rescue, people who rescue other people who accommodate other people who shut down, right? People who become stoic. I haven't done the words with my ex-wife of 20 years, but I pretty much know what her words are. And I also kind of haven't done the words with my ex-fiance, but I'm 99.99% sure I know what their words are, which makes our relationship make so much sense afterwards. Now the whole thing makes sense because they had to be a certain way, right? They had to be that persona that they had to show the world. But then their sabotage word, you could see how it spun them around all the time. I'll take rescue, for example. People who rescue other people wind up sabotaging the relationship unknowingly because they feel like, oh, I'm rescuing. They're not conscious they're rescuing, but they have to be the one who saves everyone. They have to be the one who takes care of everyone. They have to be the one that everyone goes to for help, whatever. But they wind up feeling empty inside because they're unconsciously, back to that Carl Jung again, unconsciously, I'm trying to get love and attention from people by rescuing them. But it doesn't really work because the other person, A, doesn't know you're doing it, and B, you'll never live up to that thing that you're trying to get, that love and attention. So does that make sense? That people pleasing thing?
100%. I mean, I can think of so many people as you're saying these words, and the
Right.
one in particular was my ex-husband, who was a rescuer, and he was also a hider and a shutdown person, and became stoic. So when it came to parenting and co-parenting after our divorce, my daughter, who was 13 at the time, I would try to discipline her for doing some pretty awful things in the house. And she would
Right.
call him up and say, Dad, it doesn't feel safe here. Come and pick me up.
Uh,
And he would
Wow.
show up at my door 5 minutes later and not realizing the harm he was doing. And so it is
Hmm.
a very terrible cycle of self-sabotage.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I've also along the way have come to realize that there's certain third words for people and certain sixth words that are magnets for narcissistic relationships. Um, Rescue is one of them. Um, Subordinate is one of them. For your sixth word, for your third word, people that have to be good or um, have to be nice or likable. There are certain words that are magnets for narcissists, and so people. I've talked to people. I've done the words personally with hundreds of people, and I talk to them, and somebody's, people that have certain words that are magnets for narcissists are like they go from one narcissistic relationship to the next, or they might throw an alcoholic relationship in the middle, but they'll go from narcissist to alcoholic to narcissist, and they wonder like why do I do that? How come I can't, you know? And anybody who has a third word, a sixth word of rescue, they say the same thing to me. It's like, well, when is someone going to rescue me for a change?
Yeah.
And my answer is never, because you think it's your job, so you won't let anybody rescue you,
Yeah.
which is just sets you right back into your spin and spin. And I know you've done a lot of work, but about narcissism and all that. But narcissists, you work for the narcissist. You're in a relationship with the narcissist. You are working for the narcissist, right? They're the lead singer, and you're and playing tambourine in behind the curtain. Basically, they're on. So part of that working for the narcissist, and people who rescue people like me at the time was subordinate, or people who are accommodators. Their sixth word. You're gonna come back, and that narcissist is gonna love that, because they don't have to do anything. They're being taken care of. You're working for me. You're gonna do it again, and you're gonna do it again, and you're gonna do it again.
Hmm.
So once I realized that my marriage of 2 decades I was in a relationship with a narcissist, and all the things I did like just to be likable and subordinate. I look back and I'm like, oh my God, what was I doing? And then I got into another relationship with someone who wasn't a narcissist, but still, she had her own words and her own thing to do. And I kind of got back into that thing. I put every woman I was in a relationship on a pedestal. And what happens when you put somebody on a pedestal? You take them off the hook, basically. And
Yeah,
they're looking down on you because they're up on a
exactly.
pedestal. They're looking down.
Yeah,
You're like, this doesn't work. But I just
yeah.
felt like, oh, I'm going to be a good husband. I'm going to be a good, be a boyfriend, fiance. That's what good relationships are. That, of course, now I look back on it, but I can see the fault in that. But again, being unconscious of my words, I couldn't, because I had to be likable and subordinate.
Right. Until you have that recognition, you don't realize that you're repeating patterns because the person seems different. And I think they are different in some ways, but the patterns are still there because you haven't changed anything. They are one way, you become something else in their presence. And that's
Right,
attraction until you begin to heal. I always say we date our unfinished business and we marry our unfinished business. And we hope
right,
unconsciously that somehow we are going to get the love we didn't get as a 3-year-old with this person by somehow being the person that we need to be for them. And it doesn't work. And so tell
yep.
us today how this 7-word story has helped you. What are your relationships like today?
Well, once I figured out the 7 word thing, and I said, "Oh my God, this is how I've been my whole life with all this, having to be likable, having to be subordinate, and it didn't work." But it's that whole, getting back to Carl Jung. Once you make the unconscious conscious, I you don't know what you don't know until you know it, and then you can't unknow it.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's in the conscious. So like, I don't have to be likable anymore. And it took a while, and I talk about it in the book. It's not going to, as soon as you know your words, you say, "Oh my God, now I'm going to," like that. It's over. It's changing. No, but now that I knew my words, I caught myself. It's like, oh, I was likable again. I had to be likable again. And then I became subordinate again. And it's like, dang, I did it again. Then I catch myself, oh, it was just likable. I don't want to be subordinate anymore. So I pull myself out of it. Um, I like to say it's like a gear. It's like one turns to two, turns to three, turns to four. But if I pull out that third gear of having to be likable, throw it away, you know, the mechanism stops because there's no gear turning to the next. So once I started understanding that, that actually came to me. I was on a date. I was on a Bumble date with this woman, and I thought it was going well, and it seemed like it was great. And all of a sudden, like in the middle of the date, she got up. We went to a place, we had wine, and we're dancing. And the next thing I know, she finishes her drink and walks off the dance floor and walks out the door and up the street. Didn't say a word, didn't say anything. And
Whoa.
this was like a 2.5. We're already 2.5 hours into the date, literally. And she's walking, and I go, and then the old Jerry would have sat there and said, "What did I do wrong? Like, what happened? Did I say something wrong? Maybe it was me." No, I looked at this whole situation. I go, no, I didn't do anything wrong. We were just I just walked out and I followed her up to the valet. And and this was one of those things where, when an athlete is in the zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything's in slow motion. Like you could see it. Everything's just in slow motion. So I walk up to her and she's at the valet and she turns to me, but she's really talking to the valet. And she said, "Are you stalking me?" And I saw it happening. I knew it was going on. I knew she wasn't really talking to me. She was talking to the valet. And I said to the valet, "We've been on a date for 2.5 hours. Everything seemed to be going great." She just turned around and walked out and didn't say a word. And I looked at her and I said, "You know what? I think you might be the rudest person I've ever met in my entire life." And I turned around and I walked away.
Wow.
And it doesn't sound like a lot to most people, but for somebody who had to be likable and subordinate their whole life in every relationship, it was massive for me. It was huge because I didn't play the game. I didn't bring it back on myself because this had nothing to do with what I did. This was just somebody who I didn't need to be likable to. I wasn't yelling. I just right to her face, eye to eye, and just turned around and I walked away and I went around the corner and I sat on a park bench and I high-fived myself like a goof. It was like, it was just like, and that's really honestly turned around for me. It was like, oh my God, I don't have to be likable. I don't have to be subordinate. And only to people who deserve it and to need it. And I don't have to be subordinate anymore. And honestly, that's really what turned it around. So all these, after that, and I dated a bunch of women. I've been in the same relationship it'll be 7 years on Christmas Day, actually. And she's amazing. She's great. We have this great relationship where if something happens, we talk about it either immediately or if there's other people around afterwards, and we get it out in the open, and then it's gone, and then we just, okay, next, we're fine. It was never like that for me. I always held on to everything because I had to be likable, had to be subordinate.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, so it turned my life around, and a lot of the people that I've done the words with, many of them who are ready for change, like I was, it has turned their relationships around.
Yeah,
So,
it's a great story, and I think it's very relatable. I think that those moments where you actually changed the pattern, where you showed up for yourself, where you didn't fall back into old ways, are so huge, and people don't really give them enough credit.
what are you looking for in a relationship, right? What are you looking for? I want somebody who's honest. I want somebody who's straightforward. I want somebody who, knows who they are and all that stuff, which is great. But if we don't know who we are first, we're just going to go right back into that same pattern, like I did from my first marriage to my second marriage to my relationship with the fiance. Now, they were all three totally different women. The only thing that was the same was me having to be likable and subordinate. That was the constant. So I look at that and go, oh wow. So once I realized this happened to me and understand what my words were and how they sabotaged me all those years, and I pulled myself out of that, then I was able to go and look for a legitimate relationship, or that, knowing that I wasn't playing the game for myself. I wasn't in a story. People always say, things aren't going well in your life, change your story, change your script. If you don't know what your story is, you can't change your story.
Right,
Right?
right.
Most people think their story is, well, I pick bad people. I have a bad picker. Yeah, but how are you going to stop that?
What about your picker is broken and how did it get broken? So I do a workshop on broken pickers, and
How do you? I love that.
yeah, because it is such a common thing that people say my picker's broken, but more often people will say there's something wrong with everybody out there. The pool of people who are eligible is terrible, and there's no good people, and all
Mhm.
of this particular group of people are the same, and it's not true.
Right.
It's we
No.
see what we are conditioned to see, and we
Sure.
also attract who we are. And
Yep.
when we change how we show up,
Yep.
then we change who we're surrounded by. And it may mean that you have less friends. It may mean that you're a lot more discerning about everything in your life, which is always a good thing. And it's just
Right.
some people hate it. Some people hate when you change. They get really mad that you are no longer the pushover, the people pleaser, the one saying yes to everything. But
Yep.
that's okay. And it's like that's why it's good to have support to be able to do this and when you're not alone.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I've coached the woman for a while now. Her third word is good. She had to be good all the time. Her sixth word was rescue. She married a narcissist. He left her. She went immediately into another narcissist for 18 years, and she's actually leaving him right now. But different kind of narcissist, right? One's a grandiose, one was a covert. Narcissist is a narcissist, but she had to rescue him and all that stuff, and now she's understanding it. But she lost a few people along the way. And now she's understanding. It's like, well, those people, they only liked me because I was good to them and I rescued them. That's the
Yep.
only reason they liked me. So, you definitely lose some people along the way, which is totally fine. But as you
Right.
know, people don't really like change unless you have to.
Yeah.
You have to
I
change. I
mean,
had to change. I was in a dark hole. I had two panic attacks. I mean, I couldn't stop crying. I was in a basket case. So I had to change. It was either stay down there in the fetal position in a dark hole or stand up and do something about it. Like I said, luckily I had
yeah.
meditation to kind of guide me to this place. But
Yeah.
um,
There are a lot of people who stay in that dark hole and who say they're going to change. I remember years ago, I had a client who got to a place where all the stressors in her life, the job she hated, the husband who was not a good fit for her, who was really mentally unwell, and she ended up in the hospital. And I've seen this happen to people where they end up in the hospital, they get sick, physically sick, and
mhm,
they go, okay,
yep,
that was the catalyst. I'm definitely going to make
mhm,
these changes. And as soon as they get better, they fall right back into the patterns. And for this one woman I'm
right,
thinking of, it took her probably another 15 years to finally leave her husband and speak up at work and make the changes. So
mhm,
change comes differently to different people, and not
right.
everybody is willing to change. It takes work, but it's beautiful work. It's work that frees you to be who you're meant to be. So I would love to hear your final words of advice for anyone who wants to go on their last first date.
Well, the first thing I would say is kind of figure out who you are first, because, again, when we find out who we are and how we go present ourselves to the world, we set that unconscious story to rest. Once I put that story to rest for me, dating became a whole different game. I was a different person in the dating world because I knew who was likable. I didn't have to be likable and subordinate. If you go into a dating situation where you say, I'm going to go into this with my eyes open, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, great. There doesn't have to be animosity.
So Jerry, are you going to share the rest of the 7 words, or do we have to read the book to find them out? You shared 3 of them
Well,
with
listen,
us.
we all have different words, but those are the driving words, and the other words will take some explaining, and it's like, be like me explaining my blood type to you,
Okay.
you're getting a blood test and you got my info and I got yours. But the other words are basically they're setups to that 3rd and 6th word. It's really what they are.
Okay.
And understanding how we got to that 3rd and 6th word.
Transformed your life.
Yeah, it really did.
Yeah, which is wonderful. Jerry, tell our audience how they can find you.
The website is your7words.com. There's an email address there. So if somebody needs to reach out for me, info@your7words.com. And I'd be happy to get back to someone and answer questions if you have them. I'm also on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram. And
well, thank you so much, Jerry, for coming on the show, sharing your journey, your 7 words, just how you transformed your life and found the relationship that you have, and to give hope to people who might be struggling.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody, for listening today. If you love our show, please give us a high rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Share the podcast. And as always, here's to your last first date. If you are ready to get unstuck, gain new tools, become more empowered, and finally find your last first date, I'd love to talk to you. Fill out an application to be considered for a complimentary half-hour love breakthrough session at lastfirstdate.com/application.